This took place on Valentine's Day to one of my friends. Now, at the time of this story, he was pretty much about maybe 15 years old. My friend's name was James, and he was hanging out with his girlfriend on that day. However, both of James's parents were both at work, and they had trusted James and his girlfriend to be alone. On Valentine's Day, they were alone, and they pretty much stayed inside the house watching movies. Keep in mind that this was in Illinois at the time, so the weather there was kind of a little bit off balance. It would get cold on some days, and then other days it would just get really warm. So it was to be expected. James and his girlfriend were watching a Disney movie when all of a sudden, and he heard something that came from outside. Now, honestly, James didn't even know what it was, but he heard what sounded like someone when knocking outside his house. He honestly didn't even know who it was, so he ended up looking outside through the peephole at his door. Now, of course, this was definitely weird since ding dong ditchers were more common at those places. However, as he opened the front door, he didn't see anybody, so he thought that maybe it was just some prankster. However, as he and his girlfriend were continuing with their romantic night on Valentine's Day, all of a sudden they heard the door knocking again, to which it was really odd. Of course, James looks through the peephole again at the door to find out that there was definitely some clown. This clown didn't even look like anyone that they knew, but he did look very suspicious. He was looking around and he didn't seem to notice James, but James knew exactly what the clown was. He had a large knife on his hand and he was trying to open the door. That's when James's girlfriend goes up to the bedroom to call 911. However, James has a gun that he always kept in case of intruders, so he had it up ready in case if this guy were to try to break down his door. He started banging on his door, and it honestly was really startling him since whoever it was banging on the door really loudly. As he was banging on the door, he ended up cursing sing out in some sort of language that he couldn't understand or identify. However, this clown looked really weirded out, so he did to really look at weird stuff. What I mean by weird stuff is he'd been looking around and he honestly seemed that he was in denial. It honestly was really freaky as he didn't even know what he was doing, but he started bang on the door again, screaming to be let in. Of course, as James thought that he was going to break down the door, sounds of police sirens were heard in the distance, and that's when the guy ended up getting away. But however, he did not get far as the cops were able to catch him before he got away. James and his girlfriend were questioned a few minutes about who that guy was and what he was doing and stuff. However, that wasn't the case very much, as there was a lot of really messed up things that the man said. Of course, the police officers asked James and his girlfriend if they knew him, to which they have not. Still to this day, though, James has a fear of clowns, and he honestly doesn't even know why this clown had chose to target their house on Valentine's Day, but for some reason he did. Of course, it turns out that he was a mentally unstable man who had an obsession with clowns, and he ended up going to people's houses dressed up as clowns and started scaring people. He had been doing this for maybe a few days, and of course, there were many reports on him trying to break into people's houses. One of them was a girl who was home alone, and she ended up getting murdered that night. This man, however, is locked in the mental institution, and still to this day, James doesn't even know what would have happened to him and his girlfriend if he had not noticed who was knocking on that door. This took place about maybe a few years ago in high school. Now, this was back on Valentine's Day of 2017. Now, my friend Amanda was in sophomore year at the time of this story, so since she was in sophomore year, she wasn't really the type of girl that would pretty much hang out with friends. She mainly was alone, always preferred to be by herself most of the time. However, during this story, she honestly she wanted to date this one guy, which she thought he was cute, but unfortunately he was with someone else. Now, during Valentine's Day, before Valentine's Day, there was this one cute guy that she always rejected him because she wasn't really fond of him. His name was Wade, and he honestly seemed really interested in Amanda. Amanda, however, declined him multiple times, and of course, Wade gives that look that a person gives when they cannot have their way. Honestly, Wade gets really upset every time a girl rejects him, and he ends up asking her the next day. Now, on Valentine's Day, everything went fine until the teacher was on the phone with the office. The teacher had told Amanda that the office needed to see her, so Amanda grabbed her things and headed for the office. When she approached the office, apparently her parents were there, as well as the police officer and the principal. They had said to her that apparently Wade had somehow found out her school schedule and had been stalking her almost every class for the last few days. It was later recently found out that he had been stalking other girls and even go as far as trying to follow them home whenever he didn't get their way after being rejected. Of course, there were photos that Wade had taken from the phone, and that's when Amanda looked through them. There were phones of girls in locker rooms and even girls at their houses and stuff. There was a few photos of Amanda that he had taken. Apparently one was about her parents' car and, of course, her car. Another photo shows about her house, which honestly freaks her out as to how he managed to find his way to her house. She doesn't even want to know. But one of the most disturbing photos that Amanda saw that Wade had took was a picture of her sleeping in her own bedroom. Honestly, it freaks her out even more, knowing that on Valentine's Day, even though he had been rejected, he had been going around doing this to other women. There was no actual valid evidence as much that Wade has done this to everyone else, but he has done it to a couple of girls he asked out but only got rejected. That was the only proof that they had against Wade. He had been expelled since then, and Amanda has never seen him at school since. And he wonders if Wade is still doing this kind of shit to this day, or if Wade has finally given up. So this happened to a friend of mine, which of course he and his girlfriend were on their way from their date night on Valentine's Day. To give it a bit of background information, this took place in 2019, and this was happening somewhere in Vermont. One of my friends, which of course I will state his name as Alex. Alex was in his 20s, and of course he had his girlfriend named Sandy, and she was at least 2 years older than him. Of course, at this time of this story, they had both been dating for about 2+ years, and they were going on their 3rd year. However, they were walking home one night from their date night, as they didn't feel like driving since they were completely wasted. They were really completely wasted from going to the bar on Valentine's Day and drinking, which of course was to be expected. However, they decided to go take a shortcut, which happened to be through a field, and of course it wasn't really far from the school they went to. Now, at the time of the story, they were so naive and weren't really paying attention to their surroundings, but due to them being in a drunken state, This was to be expected. Alex and Sandy ended up came home when they all of a sudden noticed a figure standing in the middle of the road. Now this figure was had hood all over him, and he looked to be maybe about 6 foot tall. They couldn't really tell as if what this person wanted and if it was someone from their school. Alex ended up looking to see that man, and he seems to be admiring them and even examining them. This was kind of odd as they weren't really expecting anything like this, but something in Alex's gut told them that this man was definitely not safe. They ended up getting home and they ended up locking the door, but however, it wasn't until a few nights later, where they ended up discovering something on the news. Now, Alex watched the news with Sandy, and of course, there was a hooded person who had been going around robbing people and stealing their possessions. It had been happening for at least a few days now, but on Valentine's Day, they found out that a woman was somewhat murdered in a back alleyway of a store. It comes to show you that on Valentine's Day can be dangerous, but anywhere is not safe, especially at night. Now, Alex and Sandy knew for a fact never to venture off while walking alone, and they had never been out there since. They still don't know to this day if this man is still out there or not, or if he's ever been caught. Alex would like to think that he's probably rotting in prison somewhere, but Sandy has her doubts about that. Of course, they're paranoid to this day, thinking that they were being watched, so back before the pandemic, they moved on from Vermont to living in Massachusetts. They had been living there since, and they haven't seen that man again, and they weren't even sure if he was ever caught, but they would like to think that he's probably caught somewhere and is probably rotting in prison.